Well, you recognize that music, don't you?
Absolutely. Iconic and a little catchy.
Legendary.
Absolutely.
All things that you could describe Mortal Kombat.
Absolutely.
The original.
The OG.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. So this is the Retro Review Crew.
Absolutely.
We are back for another episode.
That's right. Much sooner than between some of our episodes.
Yeah.
But we're glad to be back with another installment.
Well, I think we beat 2020's total of just one.
Absolutely. We're kicking butt with our second one for the year now.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, we cruised past this one as, not a long game by any means.
No. This was a nice little change of pace for us. Mortal Kombat is our first step into the fighting genre for the Retro Review Crew, I believe.
Yes.
And Mortal Kombat's iconic for a lot of reasons. Some controversial, some just, fun, and big part of when I was growing up, that game was making a splash. And
yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was an interesting time, that's for sure.
So much to say about Mortal Kombat, especially when it came out. But I wanted to ask you, like I always ask, when was your first time ever seeing Mortal Kombat?
Oh, my goodness.
Not the movie.
Not the movie.
The video game, yes.
Yes. Gosh, I think the first time that I ever saw it would have to be probably in probably a magazine.
Okay.
Knowing that it was coming out, Nintendo Power, but also some of the other ones like Game Pro and things like that would be my first exposure to it. And maybe going to a random arcade and seeing it, because it already had gotten a pretty big reputation before I'd even seen it as being, a game that was kind of, a little edgy because of all the blood and violence and especially the fatalities. So I'm thinking the first time I ever played it was probably at a random friend's of mine that had like a Sega Genesis or had a Super Nintendo. I think it was the Super Nintendo version, actually, now that I think about it, that somebody had. So my brother and I went over there to our friends and played it there for the first time, and everyone was waiting their turn, and everybody wanted to keep playing. So we played like the idea where somebody plays, whoever loses has to step on and keep facing the winner, kind of like arcade rules in its own regard. So I remember at first being like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Am I going to get in trouble for playing this if my parents find out? That's kind of my first experience with the game. How about you?
Yeah, I can actually remember the first time ever seeing Mortal Kombat. We were doing a camping trip. I think I was in first grade.
Yes.
There was this ice cream place around where our campsite was that we would always go to, and they would have arcade games in there.
Oh, nice.
So I always liked going to this place, and I see this arcade cabinet, and it's Mortal Kombat, and I see, just the demo mode going off, but they would show the fatalities on there, and I saw Sonya Blade's fatality on it, and I was just hooked. I'm like, what is this? So,
right?
I don't know if I ended up putting a quarter in that day because I was in first grade. I wasn't sure.
Sure, you weren't rolling in the money at that point.
Yeah, I wasn't rolling in the money, but I also was like, I was kind of unsure of it, so I just kind of watched it.
Yeah.
But then I remember playing the first time I played the game. It wasn't Mortal Kombat 1, it was actually Mortal Kombat 2.
Oh, okay.
I rented it.
Gotcha.
So that was my first time, and then I got Mortal Kombat 3 one year for Christmas, and that was my first copy that I owned.
I got
So then I went back, and I think I bought 2 and then 1 after that. So
yeah. It's funny because I had friends that had it. I don't think that I actually had any of the Mortal Kombats until Mortal Kombat Trilogy for the Nintendo 64.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of funny because I had definitely played other ones.
Yeah.
But with you, my biggest exposure to it was 2. I had a friend who had it, and I would go over to their house for sleepovers and stuff, and we'd play a ton of it, and we'd always be trying to look at the guides and figure out how can we do the fatalities, because that was always the big thing.
Yes.
So yeah, it's kind of funny that way. I played some of the Mortal Kombat 1 back when it was newer, but not as much. Mm-hmm. I think it was one of those two things that your parents found out you were playing it, you get in trouble or something.
Yeah, that's funny. The game, compared to now, is tame.
Oh, absolutely.
But back then, you have to understand it was not like that at all. You'd never seen something like that. And normally if your parents walked in on you playing it, they wouldn't see it unless you did a fatality.
Right.
So they would just think, oh, it's just a karate game or something,
It'd be like playing Street Fighter or something
Yeah.
at first glance.
Yeah. And this was actually my first introduction to the fighting game genre. Like, I never heard of Street Fighter, surprisingly, which was weird. Not until later.
Yeah.
A little later. Not a lot later, but...
Sure.
I mean, Mortal Kombat was the intro for me to the fighting game genre.
Got you. It's funny because I ended up... I can't remember if it was around Christmas or what. I might have been around Christmas. I was trying to decide between getting Mortal Kombat or getting Street Fighter 2 Turbo for the Super Nintendo. And I think I almost was going to get the Mortal Kombat game. And then I think my brother mentioned, or somebody mentioned something about how, it was violent and everything. And, it's a fighting game. Of course, it's going to be violent.
Right.
But mentioning, something about, the fatalities or something. And then I ended up not being able to get that one. So I got the Street Fighter 2 Turbo instead, which is still a great
fighting game. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But it was like Mortal Kombat had, this whole aura about it being kind of, the more edgy, kind of, at least for me. So it was funny that way.
I feel like Street Fighter was more of the Japanese style, and then Mortal Kombat was more like the American style,
right?
Kind of.
And I mean, if you go to an arcade at this time, you would see all kinds of fighting games. I kind of miss the old school arcades where you could go there and see all the different things. There's still little things here and there, but it's not quite the same as it was around this time.
It's just not.
So many of the games that eventually came out for, different consoles got their starts in the arcade, and you could see all kinds of fighting games from, Street Fighter 2 to Mortal Kombat to even things like Samurai Showdown and all these other fun games.
Yes.
So it was interesting because that's a lot of times where I would see what the new games were coming out. But it was one of those things where I had to decide what did I want to ask for Christmas or whatever that year, and I ended up with Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is another great game, another great franchise, but it was just funny that I wasn't sure what I was going to get that year. And Mortal Kombat, I was definitely thinking about it. I was a huge fan of a lot of the characters' design, and
they were just the ninjas, and
those were the first things that drew me in.
It all just stuck out, and then you had Sub-Zero was so iconic, he freezes people. It was so cool,
It was totally
Scorpion with the get over here. It was just
those were the characters that drew me in first. As a kid, you thought that people dressed up like ninjas and stuff were the most badass things out there. So those are the characters that drew me in the most. The other ones were these are interesting, but it's no, I got to go with Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Those are those are the main ones.
The main ones, they were the ones that really stuck out. From that first game, and then Goro, the forearms, that's so cool. I mean, Shang Tsung was cool to look at because he could transform into anybody. But
absolutely.
I just think the marketing and the look to it just all kind of came together, and it just spiraled into this huge phenomenon.
Absolutely, and that was the thing too that was so big about it was they were using actual actors for the motion capture stuff, all the mocap stuff. You have actual people that were doing it, so it looked kind of like you would see in a movie almost. You're seeing not just animated things, which was more common. You're not seeing Street Fighter where everything's it looks more like an animated thing. You're seeing people I should say a live action look to it. So you're seeing actual people that are doing these moves and everything, and that made it feel more realistic too, which I think made it feel edgier. So that was something that was very iconic as well. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting about the game too, and I keep alluding to how it felt are you going to get in trouble playing this, whatever. And a lot of that had to happen too because of the whole thing where certain congressmen, I think it was, did this whole thing about trying to get all these games in trouble. Because these games weren't rated, and they went after Mortal Kombat in particular was a big one that they really went after. I can't remember who they were. I think it was one of them was Herb Cole, which was interesting.
Oh wow, yeah,
for Wisconsin.
Wow,
and I can't remember. I think it was Joe Lieberman was the other big one. It was funny. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today about another game that was big on that too. That was called Night Trap, but that was also in a big. But that was more because it was they thought it was lewd or too inappropriate. But that's a whole nother story. But basically, it was interesting that they had these Senate hearings or whatever, kind of saying, oh, these games are too violent and these games are too lewd and these games cause all are warping our youth and stuff like that.
Well, they had the same thing in the 80s with music.
Yeah.
They went after the music industry. And
Yeah,
I
especially
think
heavy
that
metal,
was,
I would have to imagine.
They did. It was
Yeah.
heavy metal was the big one. I don't know if they went after rap. They may have went after rap too, but it was kind of a little more underground at that point.
Right.
And but heavy metal, they definitely they were. I think that's where the parental advisory kind of came out,
right
after that whole thing, and then we got the ratings too for video games. So,
right, there was like from everything from E for everyone all the way up to mature.
Yes.
And that became something that the video game industry itself kind of put into place because they figured if we don't do it, then some outside source is going to do it. So they just tried to take kind of the reins for themselves. But it's so interesting because another reason why Mortal Kombat's so iconic is because it really started a lot of that conversation about, do violent video games cause people to do violent things?
Yeah,
And one of those things where you look at Mortal Kombat now, like you said, it's pretty darn tame.
Yeah.
But these first-person shooter games and things like Grand Theft Auto with vehicular assault and killing, women of the night and stuff like that caused all kinds of questions. So it's interesting to think of like a game that's so iconic for a lot of reasons, but also that was a big reason, all the controversy that came up because of, they're like, is this causing people to be violent and doing bad things? I'm like, well, I think that got a little blown out of proportion.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't tell the difference between a video game and real life, then you have more issues to worry about.
Yes, exactly.
That's
exactly.
But you're totally right, and I think Mortal Kombat like really made anything that you can take that's not the norm or not the kid friendly. They put in the mainstream. Like I'm sure there was games that were risque, but Mortal Kombat put it into the pop culture.
Yeah. And it was funny because I think that especially with those kind of trials or those hearings or whatever they were called exactly. It's funny. It's the whole idea of like it probably actually raised more interest for people who weren't aware of it. It became that old thing. It's like, oh yeah, well if they don't want me to do this, if they don't want me to have it, then it must be cool. I should probably go get it.
Yep.
It's just kind of funny that.
I mean, like with me, like I walk into this ice cream place with the arcade in it, and it's just like it's just stood out.
Yeah,
like how can you? It was so different at that time.
So absolutely, it's like, draws you right in.
It was just rolling ball momentum. So it couldn't be stopped at that point. So
absolutely.
But I mean, this game got me into the fighting genre. That and Killer Instinct even more than Street Fighter. Surprisingly, and then I got into Street Fighter a little later. But
That's another good one, especially the original Killer Instinct was so much fun.
Yes, it was, and it was different than Mortal Kombat. But, But anyways, and I knew I had another point. I was going to go somewhere with it.
Sorry, I took us off a tangent.
No, that's okay. No, that's good because I wanted to reminisce about where we had our first encounter with these games, but
well, it's funny too. Sorry, another quick tangent is that a lot of games kind of tried to be similar to Mortal Kombat, and then you had other games that tried to be like completely different, like the Clay Fighter, genre or not genre, but series. I remember when the first one came out, and that was a big thing. Was like, well, everything's clay, So what we're seeing here is not something that kids can replicate, and it's not blood and guts. There's like little bits of clay,
right?
And I remember playing that and being like, oh, okay, well, this is more kid friendly, so to speak. But just a whole bunch of other random ones.
There was a lot of copycats. There was actually a game called Tattoo Assassins, and it was like basically a spoof. I would almost say a spoof off of Mortal Kombat.
Oh,
and they actually I think it only came out to the arcades.
Oh, okay.
They were gonna release it to home consoles, but like people would fart. But there were like fatalities again. But it was like a total spoof. Yeah, look it up one time. Tattoo Assassins.
I will have to take a look. I mean, it's not like makes me think of Primal Rage too.
Too.
That was a fun one for a while where you get to be dinosaurs or the giant apes, and they had fatalities in there too.
You almost had like two different styles of fighting game. You had the Japanese ones. There was a lot on the Super Nintendo, and then you had more like the Americanized ones.
Right.
So they were different, obviously. Yeah. Either one you like, there's no wrong answer.
Right.
Really,
no.
So.
And if you're like me, you're always kind of interested in seeing what the differences were. You walk into an arcade, especially around this period, and you could see like 8 different machines of different arcade machines that have different fighting games.
Yes.
I mean, they were just humongous at the time. So you got to see all kinds of stuff, and you never quite knew what the next thing was, or when you walked up to a console, if you hadn't seen that one before, you put a quarter in and saw where it took you.
Exactly. So why don't we just do a brief history about the makings of the game?
Yeah.
So Mortal Kombat is an arcade fighting game developed and published by Midway in 1992. Midway does not exist anymore, unfortunately.
Sadly.
Which is really sad. They were so prominent. But
absolutely.
it is the first entry in the Mortal Kombat series and subsequently was released by Acclaim Entertainment for nearly every home platform at the time. The game focuses on several characters of various intentions who enter a martial arts tournament with worldly consequences. It introduced many key aspects of the Mortal Kombat series, including the unique 5-button control scheme and gory finishing moves called fatalities. Mortal Kombat is considered as one of the greatest video games of all time by critics and audiences in 21st century and became a best-selling game and remains one of the most popular fighting games in the genre's history, spawning numerous sequels and spin-offs over the following years and decades, beginning with Mortal Kombat 2 in 1993, and together with the first sequel was the subject of a successful film adaptation in 1995. However, it also sparked much controversy for its depiction of extreme violence and gore using realistic digitalized graphics, and along with the home release of Night Trap, prompted the formation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, ESRB,
Yes.
a U.S. government-backed organization that set descriptor ratings for video games. So, yeah.
It's just interesting. Like I said, I listened to this random podcast and they were talking about the Night Trap game and kind of brought it all full circle. Wasn't even thinking about it today, that it would all come back to this. So.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting.
I just want to read a little quick part about the development because I think it's kind of big with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mortal Kombat creators Ed Boon and John Tobias have stated that Midway Games tasked them with the project of developing a combat game for release within a year, which the two believe was intended to compete with the popular Street Fighter II, The World Warrior. According to Tobias, he and Boon had envisioned a fighting game similar to Karate Champ, but featuring large digitalized characters even before that, and the success of Street Fighter II only helped them convince the management of their idea. Boon said the development team initially consisted of 4 people, himself as programmer, artist John Tobias and John Vogel, and Dan Forden as sound designer. So,
Wow.
So they had this, they had this idea, and it just really took off. So
Yeah.
I don't want to go into the whole thing about it, but
Sure.
you can read more of that on Wikipedia. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's all there for you. But so yeah, let's get into it. So I beat this game on 2 different versions.
Yeah.
I did beat the Super Nintendo version about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I mean, granted, I beat the game back when I was a little kid, but I only beat like with one character, Scorpion.
Yeah.
I
You
just
kinda
kept
had your
doing
favorite, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I was too.
And then, so about 4 or 5 years ago, I had this idea that I wanted to beat it with all the characters. I did all the fatalities, but then since we're doing it for the Retro Review Crew, I was like, I gotta do it again. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't do it on Super Nintendo this time. I did on the Sega Genesis,
Yes.
the Sega Genesis Mini, which I have, which is the At Games version. I know my version is not the greatest. It has a little sound difference, and it also freezes after you beat the game. But you have the better At Games Sega Genesis version. So.
I was fortunate in that regard,
Yes.
yeah. So, and that's what I played mine on. So it was good because we had similar experiences to some degree, but a little bit of difference just because of the differences of the 2 different versions of it. But yeah, so we played it in a similar setting that way as well. Probably way back in the day, way back when I did play it on the Super Nintendo, and I do think that I beat it. I think I was either Scorpion or Sub-Zero. My guess is probably Scorpion as well.
Yeah. He seemed very easy to
he was
beat the
more
computer
user
with.
friendly, I
Yeah.
think, to join, and plus his spear works well. I've worked on Goro,
Yeah.
which was always fun.
That's huge. That spear is devastating.
Yeah.
So.
And Goro was always kind of like the big scary guy.
Yes.
But once you got used to how to fight him, he wasn't so bad. It was more of just the initial shock of, okay, this is giant 4-armed guy. That's just gonna, kick my butt.
Yeah, he's intimidating. He was intimidating for like you're playing this and you're what, 7, 8 years, 9 years old, and
Right.
you see this thing like, wow, how am I beating this? It took a while. So.
Exactly. Once you kind of got a feel for how to fight him, just like all the other characters, you learn their strengths, their weaknesses, little tricks that work.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes just the idea of, okay, geez, how am I gonna fight this giant thing? He's gonna kick my butt.
Yes.
Yeah, can be a little overwhelming at first. So yeah.
Yes. But obviously you can buy this game on, it came out for the Sega Genesis, it came out for the Super Nintendo. I believe you could probably even get it for, not counting like the newer like re-releases on like the Xbox. You could play the arcade version on Xbox.
Yeah.
That came with like I think Mortal Kombat 2 and 3 as well. But
yeah, and they even have versions for like portable. Like there's a Game Gear
Yes.
version. There was this like original Game Boy version.
yes. I actually had the Tiger handheld one.
Oh,
I had that
cool.
one.
Yeah.
I think you could pick like two or three characters,
Yeah.
but yeah. So it says it came out on the arcade obviously first, Super Nintendo, Game Gear, Game Boy, Genesis, Mega Drive, Master System actually, which is surprising.
Absolutely.
It came out on MS DOS,
I was gonna say, I bet you there was a
That's
PC
interesting.
release or some version of computer.
and it came out for the Sega CD.
The
Interesting.
poor Sega CD.
The Amiga and mobile phone. Way back in 2004.
Oh,
So I don't even know what phone. Flip phone?
that. I don't think I even had a cell phone in 2004. Isn't that funny?
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, that was newer around
I
that
probably
time.
got mine like 2005.
Yeah. Yeah.
College.
But yes, it did come out for the Xbox Live. I don't think it's on there anymore, so I don't think you can pick that up anymore.
Right.
But it was,
Yeah.
if you wanted to play the arcade version on a console, that was the way to do it. So,
Yeah. Very
but
cool.
anyways, so let's get into the game here. So now, I believe you started on one side and I started on the other side with characters who we went through the game with.
Yeah, I started with Scorpion on my end, and I think you must have started with Johnny Cage.
I was with Johnny Cage. Yep.
Gotcha. So, yeah. If we kind of want to just maybe go through the characters quick.
Yeah. So Scorpion. You started with him.
Yeah.
You had no problems using him.
No, and I remembered a lot from just being a kid. I think one of the reasons that I was drawn to Scorpion when I was a kiddo, again, just like Sub-Zero, they looked cool. They looked like ninjas. But also Scorpion has a pretty simple move set. He's got his, spear.
Yes.
Get over here, the classic.
Yes.
Which is really easy to use, easy to spam. Just, hitting back a couple buttons and then the right punch button. And then it always just pulls the opponent close and leaves them kind of like groggy. So it's usually you just do a sweet uppercut after that, set him flying, and rinse and repeat. And then he just has that other move as the teleport punch, which honestly you don't use as often, but allows you to kind of get around your opponent and hit him from the other side.
Yep.
Sometimes you can use it in midair. You can kind of escape from your opponent. So that was kind of fun. And he also, in my opinion, has the easiest fatality in the game.
Yeah.
All you have to do is hit up at about sweep distance.
Yes.
So usually I just hold block, up, and boom, he pulls off his head and spits out some fire, one of the most iconic fatalities as well.
Yep.
I found him to be a pretty fun character to play as, easy to jump back into, and just a good character to play to get back in the habit. His whole basis is that he's was murdered. And he and his family, I believe, were murdered by Sub-Zero's clan, the Lin Kuei.
Yes.
And so he has come back, for vengeance, to basically kill Sub-Zero, to avenge his family. So he's dead, basically. One of the things that gives him some edge to himself, too. Including when he does his fatality, when he pulls off his his hood, and you see that his face is a skull.
Yeah.
He spits out that fire and turns his opponent into,
Burning
basically
ash.
burnt ash and
Yeah.
bones.
Yep.
He's pretty hardcore that way. Any thoughts on Scorpion?
Well, yeah, he's the guy I beat when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I think he's the easiest to use. I didn't really use the teleport punch, but I could see why you'd want to use it for people that are just spamming the projectiles.
Absolutely.
I could definitely see that coming in handy, but the get over here is so devastating this game.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you want to use that big time.
Absolutely. And it works really well on on the bosses too. It works really well on Goro.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just funny because he doesn't have like a groggy, so when you just pull him over, he's groggy, but he's just standing there like he's normal. And it works really well on Shang Tsung at the end too. You just kind of wait. If he's throwing his little skulls, you just wait until you get a little break, throw it in there, pull him in, and pop him.
I mean, Shang Tsung's pretty easy, I think.
He really is.
Compared to Goro. Like, Goro's beatable.
Yeah.
If we're talking like Mortal Kombat 2, the bosses there, and 3, they get a lot tougher.
They do.
But he gives you a decent challenge.
He does. His fireballs do some good damage too. But Shang Tsung, once you realize that all his tricks are basically he throws those, flaming skulls.
Yes.
Or he turns into somebody else, you can kind of wait. You kind of just duck the skulls, pop them one, and then, wait for your opportunity. He's actually pretty easy to beat.
He is. The only person you don't want him to turn into is Goro, pretty much,
Which he inevitably seems to always do. Like, he'll turn into a couple other people, but he seems like he always turns into Goro at some point in a fight.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. Then you just got to wait it out and just treat him like he is Goro. Same things are going to work on.
Yeah. Before we go through Scorpion's ending to the game, let's just do real quick the difference between the Super Nintendo version and the Sega version.
Sure.
So the first one that I noticed is Super Nintendo actually has better sound, I think, to it.
Yeah.
However, Super Nintendo is the most tamest version because it doesn't have blood.
Right.
And the fatalities are very PG-ish.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing you're going to get with Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
But there is that one level where Shang Tsung is watching you, and in the Sega version, he doesn't do anything. But in the Super Nintendo, he actually will clap after the,
Yeah.
So, it's too bad they couldn't, have besides the arcade version, obviously.
Right.
But it's too bad that they couldn't combine these two and make a better, just the overall console, version
absolutely.
for it. I don't know how the Sega CD version is, but maybe that is the better one. I don't know, but
sure.
But that's just wanted to go over the differences because I think they're with Sega though you do have to put the blood code in to get the blood. So
yes, once you have that going, it's kind of fun to have that on just because it gives a little extra, extra something to it.
Right. And this game, you could play 2-player, 1 versus 1. Or you can do the tournament mode, which is basically you fight everyone, then you fight your mirror match, and then you do 3 endurance rounds.
Right.
Which actually are probably tougher than Goro and Shang Tsung.
I would agree.
Because you got to beat 2 people. Is it 2? Right, it's 2, right?
Yeah, 2 at full health.
2 on 1, yep.
Yeah, so you beat one opponent, and then the second one comes on, and you have to fight them at their full health bar. So endurance is definitely a tricky one.
Yes.
And sometimes you just find yourself fighting as cheap as possible to get through the endurance rounds.
Yep.
But and then you face Goro, and then you face Shang Tsung at the very end.
Yep, and then you beat the game.
And then you beat the game, and you get to that sweet ending.
So then Scorpion's ending. So when you beat the game with Scorpion, you get the description that said, marked for death years ago by the Lin Kuei, Scorpion was murdered by Sub-Zero. He left behind a wife and a child in his former life, but was allowed to return and avenge his death. Even with Scorpion's triumph in the tournament and new title as Grand Champion, the price he paid was high. He can never again know his family and must exist forever with his secret curse.
Interesting. So his family actually didn't get killed. He got killed.
He got killed.
I got that wrong. Okay.
So he's he just kind of comes. He's allowed to come back basically, but he's just It's almost like the movie The Crow, almost in a way. He's just pissed off no matter what.
Yeah.
Or at least in Mortal Kombat 1, that's his ending.
Vengeance has a price.
Yeah. All right. I guess then we'll go to the character I use first. We'll do Johnny Cage.
That's the guy.
Yep. He's kind of like a movie star actor, but he does know how to fight because he's versatile in it.
Yeah.
So why don't you go over Johnny Cage's movesets?
Absolutely. So he's one of the characters that has he has 3 different moves that he can do. He has his fireball that he likes to throw. I think it's called a firebolt. Kind of throws that in an arc at the old opponent there. So that's his projectile. He has that kind of shadow kick move, which is another iconic move. That's good for closing distance and getting a nice kick on an opponent. And then he has his most iconic move at this point was the groin punch, where he goes the splits and then punches somebody right in the old gooselberries there. An attack that doesn't work on everybody. I don't think it works on Sonya. It definitely doesn't work on Goro.
Yeah. Unlike the movie.
Yes. Which is funny, because in the movie that's one of the ways
that's how he gets them.
Yeah. And it doesn't work on Shang Tsung. So it's interesting, but yeah, that's a move that's pretty satisfying when you hit it on somebody.
Yeah.
But a lot of times probably not the best move to go to.
Right.
But it's still a fun move to hit.
I mean, it's cool you get 3 at that point, because then if one's only you can use on certain people.
Right.
But, so that is nice.
And some characters only have 2 specials, and some characters have a lot. Have I think Sonya might have 4. So yeah, it's just interesting that way. But it gives him some versatility. The fireball is good for, keeping people at a distance. The shadow kick is good if people get over your fireball, get too close, you can knock them back. And the groin punch is just a way to really rub it into your friend.
Yes.
That you're kicking their butts. And then his fatality is, I believe I'm trying to think, is that the one where he uppercuts their head off, I believe?
No, it might be. I know in later versions... Does it say in there?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. It just tells you how to do it. But I feel like he has the one where he uppercuts their head off.
I think you're right, because in later version he has the shadow kick that knocks their head off.
Right, or like their torso even. In one of the
their
versions.
torso. Yeah.
I think if you don't have blood if you don't have the blood mode on, he just does a shadow kick and knocks them over. If you have the actual blood on, then he actually uppercuts and knocks their head off.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of decapitation in the Mortal Kombat series, so you'll find that out quick.
Yep. Not one of the best.
Little music break.
Sorry about that. Okay.
And Bingo was his name.
There you go. Yeah. But yeah, he his fatality isn't like the greatest, but it's still pretty brutal.
Yeah, and it's not too hard to do. You're I think you just hit forward 3 times and then a high punch. And knock their head clean off. Yeah. I believe that too when I was looking around to kind of see what like a tier list was for who they thought were like the best and worst characters while playing other people, is that Johnny Cage was actually really high on the list as one of the better characters. I believe they actually had Sonya, we will get to in a little bit, as the best character, and they had Scorpion as the worst character.
Wow.
The one that I saw. And again, I'm not saying that one is official, but it's interesting. And I think that's mostly just for, like tier ratings for playing between people.
Between people. Yeah, and I didn't play this game much between people, really. Yeah. It's just more the computer. So I wonder, I mean, that could definitely be.
And I think some characters are probably just better at, keeping people away from them and things like that, and other characters, too, might have little tricks, little glitches that you can probably exploit too.
Sure. They always do.
But but that's just the fun little note there, is that I think Johnny Cage they had as number 2 on the list as being one of the best characters in the game for playing against other people. So.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Even if you can't go and punch everybody, you can still find your way to victory.
Right. Well, when you beat the game with Johnny Cage, his ending is... Through the battles and life or dead situations faced during the tournament, Johnny Cage learns the true importance of his fighting skills. He also realizes the full potential of the tournament. He returns to Hollywood after defending his new title as Grand Champion. Cage goes on to film Mortal Kombat, the movie, and its many successful sequels. So that's what he did. So after
foreshadowing there,
Mortal Kombat 1.
Yeah.
So Johnny Cage, I didn't really have too big of an issue. I thought his finisher his fatality wasn't too hard to pull off, at least from my perspective. So Yeah, I enjoyed playing as him. So, who was the second character that you beat the game with?
So I went right down the ninja list and went to Sub-Zero.
Oh, okay.
I think in a lot of ways I thought I liked better than Scorpion, but he was trickier to play as a kid. Even though he only, again, has 2 moves. He has the freeze, which is probably, right up there with Scorpion's, harpoon, spear, whatever, as far as being one of the most iconic things in the game.
Yes.
Being able to freeze an opponent and then give him a sweet uppercut was always a really cool thing. And then he has the move eventually just slides across and kind of trips somebody up. That's another move that they kept quite a bit. A move that actually is really useful, but sometimes I forget he even has it because it's so much fun just to freeze people.
Right.
And then his fatality was just an interesting thing because it's one of the differences, again, between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. It's 2 different things. In the Super Nintendo, when he freezes them and then he just uppercuts them and that top part shatters.
Oh, okay.
But in the Sega Genesis version, and this is one I always remember, is he actually just grabs the person and just pulls their head off with the spine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh.
Like I said, decapitations were popular.
Wow.
First of all, I don't know what gym this guy goes to that he's got the strength to just pull somebody's head clean off with the spine. But so that one was interesting. And that fatality is actually not too hard to do. Most of them in the game aren't too bad once you figure out. But again, one where you have to be right next to your opponent usually makes it easier.
Yeah.
I believe all you have to do with him is just you hit forward, down, forward, and then high punch, and off comes their head. But yeah, I really liked Sub-Zero. He was a lot of fun to play as, just like Scorpion. Didn't find too many challenges through normal opponents, and you can freeze Goro. Again, in later games, you wouldn't have so much success against those bigger bosses.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really be able to freeze them. Even when you go into Mortal Kombat 3 and Motaro, you would try to throw a projectile at him, the game would automatically reflect it off.
Yeah, boom, yeah.
So I think that's another reason why Goro is easier to fight than a lot of those later ones, is because he doesn't have any special defenses against that kind of stuff. His basic defense is try to throw his projectile at you, which does a lot of damage, but you just work around it. But yeah, Sub-Zero I thought was actually a really fun character to play as, iconic, and pretty easy to beat. Pretty much anyone in the game that I faced on going through the tournament mode. And he's always one of my favorites, so he's always fun to go back to anyways.
And if you freeze him twice, you get frozen.
That's true.
That's the other thing.
Very true, which I still don't know how that works exactly. But
yeah. It's double free, yeah.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed playing as Sub-Zero. I thought now I'm older, I thought he was more rewarding than Scorpion, because I feel like when I play as Scorpion, I fall into the spear too much.
Sure.
I felt like Sub-Zero was a little more methodical in ways that you could use.
Yeah, he's a thinking man, Scorpion.
Yes. So I enjoyed beating the game as Sub-Zero. It was, I didn't think most of his moves weren't too hard to pull off.
Right.
So I might have had trouble with the slide maybe a couple times or so, but yeah.
The slide's weird because
it's hard to know when to use it and when it's good. Yeah.
And I often, like I said, I would forget even that it was a move half the time. And then I'd remember, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll incorporate it here and there. But yeah, it doesn't get used anywhere near as often as freeze gets used when I'm playing a Sub-Zero.
Right. That's your main go-to.
Yeah, it's just an extra trick, in the Mortal Kombat tool belt there.
So after you beat the game with Sub-Zero, his ending is, after receiving the title of Grand Champion, Sub-Zero disappears back into the shadows from which he came. His only goal in the tournament was the assassination of Shang Tsung. He was paid a large sum of money by one of Tsun's wealthy enemies. With his mission accomplished, Sub-Zero will collect his fortune and retire from his dangerous profession.
It's interesting with his ending, too, because you think of him as obviously being... It's hard not to think of him as pretty evil, considering he assassinated Scorpion.
Yes.
But the ending there doesn't necessarily make him sound like... It doesn't make him sound like a good guy, necessarily, but it certainly doesn't make him... makes him sound almost more neutral.
Yes, like a bounty hunter kind of.
Exactly, that he would go in there and kill Shang Tsung, who obviously is a very evil individual, and then disappear and retire.
Yeah, I know.
It's interesting, yeah.
Well, it's also funny. I mean, when we get into it in later games, his story, how it changes very much.
Well, there's also different versions. I believe in the second one, they say that the Sub-Zero that killed his killed Scorpion is a different Sub-Zero than the one that you see in the second or third one. I can't.
Third one.
When he takes his mask off and he has like the scar.
Yes, he gets betrayed by the Ling Kuo, I think.
Well, it's because that's when they go through the whole
different.
idea of like wanting turning like the ninjas into cyborg things like
Yes.
Sector and Cyrax and that point, who are in the same clan. They like agree to like basically become these robots.
Yeah, which is so weird.
And then Sub-Zero and Smoke.
Yes.
Who is a hidden character in Mortal Kombat 2.
True.
But they both try to escape because they don't want to get turned into that. But I think they capture Smoke and force him
to do it. Oh, geez.
Because basically, I think it's like they don't have their souls anymore when they go into that. And
correct.
that's why when like in Mortal Kombat 3, when like all like Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn and everything, like they take all the souls of everybody, like that's why the robots are still there because they don't have their souls anymore.
Oh, that makes sense. And,
yeah.
And the interesting thing about Sub-Zero is you can play as both the classic version and the new version in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
And Trilogy.
And Trilogy 2. Yep, and Trilogy 2.
Yes.
But yes, we'll get into that later. But,
absolutely. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Who did you play as next?
So the second guy I played as was Kano.
Oh, Kano. Mr. Cannonball Run himself.
Mr. Kano, but yep. Kano, to me, I thought was really easy to play as. I mean, why don't you run down his moves?
I would love to. He doesn't have too much to worry about. He has his Cannonball spin move, which is one of those moves that's
fun.
As a kid. Yeah,
I like pulling it off.
Yeah, as a kid,
it's circle.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
So if you've ever people who've played like Street Fighter know, like with Zangief when he does this like spinning pile driver move, which was really hard as a kid to like to grasp. Where you have to do basically a full 360 on your controller, your control pad to do. It was like kind of intimidating, and now I got to a point where like games I'm like, oh yeah, obviously this is how it works, but at the time I was like, how do I get this to work? But basically if you do the same thing, you don't even have to like throw in any kind of attack, you just have to do the motion of starting like forward and going all the way around. You do like the cannonball move, and then I believe when you release, you go off and you can hit somebody, and you can actually like kind of angle it. So it's a really good move, and not as hard to do once you get a feel for it. And then you also can throw his knife, which is really fun too. So he has his projectile in that. I miss and later in Mortal Kombat 3 where he gets the move where he can just grab somebody and just choke them.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that in this one, but it's still pretty fun. But yeah, and then he has this fatality, which I think I always remember as one of the more iconic fatalities too. And it's a simple one, like it's just back low punch. And you and just reaches and grabs their heart and just pulls it up.
Yes.
And if you have blood mode on, like you see a lot more. You see like the blood dripping and like the heart looks like it's beating. And everything.
Beating. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a pretty intense one.
Yep.
But yeah, Kano. Again, just not a ton of moves to remember, and it makes it easier to kind of throw them in there and really keep your opponent on edge. I feel like Kano is really good at kind of controlling where the opponent is. If they try to jump at you, the cannonball move is good to keep them away, and if you can projectile to kind of keep them away from you a lot if you want to control that, and then get close to them on your own terms.
The cannonball's very like you can pull it off at strategic moments. So it always kind of keeps the opponent guessing.
Absolutely.
Yep. With Kano.
And if they overthink it, then you can nail them with your projectile or hit them in a way they're not expecting. I feel like out of all the computer opponents, Kano was one of the ones that would sometimes surprise me with being annoying. Because of that. I think he and Sonya were probably the ones that I found to be the most annoying to fight.
Yes.
Especially in an endurance run if they were on the same team.
Oh, yeah, that was tough. I lost him a couple times,
Absolutely, same here.
Going through that. So yeah, with me, I enjoyed playing as Kano. I thought he was one of the easier characters as far as move wise and to beat the game with. So once you beat the game with Kano, his ending is with the defeat of Goro and Shang Tsung. Kano will bring his own brand of treachery to the tournament. His Black Dragon organization forms a monopoly over the contest. That brings shame and torment to all those involved. Their reign will end in anarchy and death. It will result in the final dismantling of the tournament and the Battle of the Sans.
Well, that's a nice cheerful ending for everybody.
Yeah, no kidding.
A little side note on Kano, too, is that out of all the characters in the game, he was probably the one that I found the least interesting as a kid.
Yeah. He was kind of
I wasn't really drawn into him.
Yep.
And a lot of times, as an evil character that you can play as, he's not necessarily, what a kid jumps to as much at that point. But he was one of those characters that now in later games, too, I got a lot more appreciation for. Like in Mortal Kombat 3, I actually enjoyed playing as him a lot. But yeah, he was definitely an important character and a character that once you give a chance is actually a lot of fun to use and pretty darn effective.
Yeah, I think when you appreciate him more when you're older. I agree. Yep.
When you've matured.
Yeah, matured.
Yeah. So I think the next one for me would have been Sonya Blade.
Okay.
The only lady in the game at this point. Which is interesting too, because she's also rated as in the list that I've seen as the number one best character for facing other players. So Sonya is she's like a special operative kind of person, and I remember one of the biggest things I remember for her is, of course, her some of her special moves, her leg attack, her leg throw attack, scissor kick thingy.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that I found so tricky to use in the heat of a fight, but the computer would be really good with it.
Oh yeah, they hit it all the time.
They'd always hit you, and it does a lot of damage.
Yeah,
too.
It does.
She basically flips over, grabs them with the legs, and slams them down the other way. And what makes it tricky is that you have to hit down, but you also have to hit low punch and low kick, which on our controllers for that game, they're not right next to each other. You have to kind of change the way you're holding this controller almost to do it reliably, which in the heat of a fight doesn't really work so smoothly. She also has her ring toss ability, which is really effective, and then again her projectile, so she can do that. And then she has her flying punch move, which is another interesting one. You just hit forward, back, and high punch, and then she goes up and can knock somebody down in the air. So because of that and her 3 attacks there, she can keep people at a distance. People try to jump at her. She can knock them out of the air.
Yes.
And that with probably the leg toss and the flying punch. So she's really good at really controlling where her opponents are, and I think that's probably a big reason as to why she's one of the best in the game. And her fatality is interesting too. It's the kiss of death.
Kiss of death, yep.
Where she can be pretty far away, and it's forward, back, and then you hit block. And she basically does what you would expect. She, blows a kiss, goes over to the opponent, and boom, sets him on fire. Well, maybe you wouldn't expect that, but that is what it does. Sonya's pretty darn effective. I found her to be a little tricky for me to get used to using all of her moves. Again, she's one of these characters where a lot of times those kind of zoning moves where you keep your opponent away, like the teleport punch for Scorpion or the slide for Sub-Zero, or in her case, the flying punch, I would not think about it as often.
Yeah.
So it'd be easy to forget about. But yeah, she has a lot of moves at her disposal, and she could be a lot of fun, and she could also be really frustrating to face. So, yeah.
The almost like the Hurricane Rana move that she does with the knees. That was kind of tough to pull off actually at times against the computer at least. I'm sure if I played more as her, it would be a little better. But
when you get used to it more.
Yeah. So that was a little tougher. She was a little more trickier to use, but I think if you master her, I could see why she'd be. And she's got 3 moves, so So her fatality wasn't too bad, though. I did not have a problem with that. So.
Yeah. It's when you can do without thinking too much. And when you get to the flow of it, you don't have to think about it as much. And you can feel like you're doing it in every match in the tournament, getting all those fatalities and all those bonus points.
Yep.
It's kind of a cool moment to see how high you can get that score to go.
Test your might, my friend.
Absolutely.
Anyways, once you beat the game with Sonya, captured by Shang Tsung, Sonya's special unit was taken hostage. Their only hope was the tournament. Shang Tsung promised to release the entire team, only if Sonya could win the contest. Her victory not only released her unit, but also put an end to the Black Dragon and Shang Tsung's powerful grip on the tournament. So
a little bit more cheerful.
A little more cheerful. Ending. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I forgot to say, too, during your tournament, you'll get to test your might, where you have to press Y and B, like, simultaneously. And
to build up your meter to break different materials.
Yes, to break different materials. So it progresses throughout your tournament. So.
Yeah, I think it's wood, stone, and then maybe like steel or iron or something at the highest level.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep. So my next character, and this guy made me frustrated. I liked him, don't get me wrong, but Raiden. I played as Raiden as my third.
Oh, yes, the Thunder God, or the Lightning God, whatever.
But
one of those gods.
Yes. Please go over Raiden's movesets.
I would be delighted. Mm-hmm. So he also has 3 moves. He has his classic Lightning, which is his projectile. It's just down, forward, low punch, and he sends a bolt of lightning at the opponents. He has his flying attack, where he is like a body torpedo kind of thing, and he makes his Fightin' Bubba Day.
Yeah, Super Nintendo, you get it a lot more.
To this day, I still don't know exactly what he's saying, so I just assumed it was Fighting Bubba Day. And anyways, that sends him. He launches himself at the opponents, just back, forward, and if he gets him, he pushes them into the wall, and they take damage, and it's a nice way of closing a gap and keeping people on their toes. And then he has his teleport move, which is just down, up, and then he teleports from where he is closer to the opponent. Sometimes he can show up like right in front of them, sometimes even behind them. That's a move, again, like a lot of the other moves that I would often forget to use. But it's cool, and it's a nice option to have, and plus just really... it's fun to do.
Yeah.
His fatality was one of the ones that was funny because it's not like that it's super complicated, but at the same time it was one that was difficult to feel like you could do consistently at first. It's forward, and then back and high punch. And it sounds like it should be easy, but I think a lot of times, especially as a kid, one of the things was like, what's the kind of the rhythm to it, Because when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of time to do it. You tend to go really, really fast.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work. So it's almost like you have to get into that rhythm of it. And it's tough to do that, to get comfortable with that. Once you do, then you'll feel like you can do it every time without issue. But it's hard to get that.
Yeah.
And I feel like his, for whatever reason, was one that we both struggled with getting. For a while.
It took me a long time because I didn't know you could hold down the block button, but it was tougher to do for me. I just... once I pulled it off once was good enough.
Yeah.
I know some people can just pull it off like that, but I had troubles with this one for whatever reason. I liked all his other movesets, though. I did like playing as him, and he was a lot of fun. I did notice his like flying push or whatever. That gets blocked pretty easy once the computer kind of recognizes like what you're doing. So
and it leaves you pretty vulnerable if they block it. So it's one of those things that you don't want to use too much.
Yeah, I feel like he can get figured out if I'm playing other people.
Right. So. His fatality is a cool one.
Yes.
He's pretty much puts a lightning bolt into like the opponent's head and makes their head explode.
Oh wow, that is cool.
Which is it's a cool one. And it's satisfying once you finally get it.
Yes.
Frustrating.
Once you beat the game with Raiden. Yeah, this was the hardest one for me for sure. But anyways, once you beat the game with Raiden's victory comes as no surprise to him. He was never impressed by Shang Tsung's inferior sorcery, Goro's brute force, or the challenge of the other contestants. He quickly becomes bored with his mortal competition and soon invites other gods to participate on the contest. The ensuing battles rage on for years, and the wars result in our world's final destruction. Have a nice day.
What I think is hilarious about that is you think of, at least I always think of Raiden as like a really good guy.
Yeah.
And this one, they make him second like an arrogant prick.
Yes, exactly.
And
that's what's funny about this.
It doesn't look like he's here to save the earth at all. No. It sounds like he's here just to kind of fight for why not.
Yeah, exactly. Just to get like some excitement in his day or something.
Exactly. And then the world gets destroyed. I don't know, just strange.
It is weird. I think like Mortal Kombat puts like comedy into it. So it's like I don't know. I think they went more serious towards the end, or towards the newer games. But this was almost like a spoof at a point.
So. It was almost kind of making fun of itself to a degree.
Yeah. So who was your
So then,
your next character?
It was Liu freaking Kang, which I believe is
right.
the last person that we have not talked about out of the main ones, which is kind of funny because he's kind of the poster child for the series as far as being the guy who, canonically wins the first two tournaments. He was always a character that was like, he was there, but he didn't really appeal to me all that much. He's a character that, obviously has the high-pitched Bruce Lee kind of sounds.
Yes.
Pretty clearly that he's heavily influenced by Bruce Lee.
Yeah. Yep.
And he only has two special moves as well. He has the fireball, which in later games he can do high and low, but in this game, just straight across.
Yep.
As his projectile, it's just forward, high punch. And then his other one is the flying kick, where he just flies across the screen and kicks somebody, which is forward, high kick. So he's definitely a character that's easy to pick up and know what his moves are. There's not a lot of room for confusion. His fatality was not easy at first, which is funny too, because it's just like it's basically the same as Kano's cannonball move. And you want to hold the block button while you do it to make it easier. And I would try to do one rotation all the way around the controller, and it wouldn't work. And so I just would do one and then continue to start another one, and then it would work. And he does a cartwheel and then uppercuts the opponent.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I definitely struggle with Raiden a lot. I didn't do too bad on this one, but I can see where people would struggle with not getting that whole, circle of motion. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I found that Liu Kang was actually one that as funny as it is, because he seems simple and straightforward, he was a character I actually had more trouble with beating the tournament mode than I did with a lot of other characters. And I don't know if and I've never really been good with him at any of the Mortal Kombats, which is funny too. But yeah, he seems like a character that's fun enough. For whatever reason, I just could not get into a good rhythm with him where I felt really super comfortable. And I felt like I would roll down to trying to spam his specials too often, in which case then, I would just get myself set up for some frustration that way. Right. So although he's a cool character and, like I said, very iconic, he was just never a character that I clicked with as much.
He doesn't. His look in this game is kind of plain compared to what he kind of turns into more in later games. But the one thing that sticks out is this high pitched. It's similar to. It's similar to Raiden's kind of a little bit, but that's kind of how he stuck out to me in the first game, at least. Yeah,
I gotcha. Well, and it's funny because he's actually the actor that does Liu Kang in the game is the same actor who does Shang Tsung in the game.
That's funny.
Because at the end of the game, once you beat it, it shows all the different people that were models or actors for each person, and it's funny because it goes through the names, and you're like, oh, okay. And just little fun things like that.
Funny stuff.
Tidbits,
right. So after you beat the game with Liu Kang, his story is, after defeating Mighty Goro and putting an end to Shang Tsung's rule over the tournament, Kane is able to return the contest to its rightful hosts, the Shaolin Temples.
Woo.
Kang's heroics will always be remembered. He will continue the traditions of the Shaolin Temples and restore the true pride and respect of this once great tournament. So a little better ending there.
Absolutely, a little happier.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the story, canonically, he's the person who wins the first tournament and wins the second tournament.
Wow.
And then it gets a little bit different after that.
After that one, yeah.
But yeah, he's a big deal. So once you have to eventually face Goro after you face these other guys, and Goro, of course, is again the big boy. He's got his 4 arms. He also has some moves that are kind of powerful. He shows up right after you beat your last endurance match. Like he falls down. Starts to, and you're like, oh, well, crap.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you. It's an interesting way of catching you off guard because you're not expecting it, especially the first time it happens.
Right.
And Goro does a lot of damage with his attacks. He can kind of jump over. He can grab you and pound on you.
Yes, that's his coolest move.
Yeah.
He also has a projectile too, I believe. Yep.
He has a projectile where he shoots like a fireball out and makes it kind of looks like he's doing like a punching motion. And the fireball comes out and that does a lot of damage. Like all of his attacks, if they hit you, do a lot of damage. But if you learn kind of how to keep him away from you and how to use kind of moves like the freeze, spear, all that kind of stuff, you can minimize a lot of
Yeah.
that.
Depending on what difficulty you play on too, I think
That's
he's
true.
like, if
That's a
you
good
time it, like after you do a kick to him and you time it, you can almost do it again, like the whole match.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So-
He is a fun character to beat. You can't do a fatality on him or Shang Tsung, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which is always
Too
one of those things
bad.
that I wish you could do. And then when you beat Goro, you fight Shang Tsung next. And he is an interesting character because he's basically he's the shapeshifter. He's the final boss. After you fight Goro, he seems kind of like a step back almost. So it almost feels like Goro would be more of a scary final opponent. Shang Tsung, I guess hypothetically, has the most potential out of any character because he can turn into any character, including Goro. Most of the fights he starts by shooting his flaming skull attacks, which can be anywhere, I believe, from 1 to 3 of them in a row. Now, if you get hit by those, they deal a lot of damage to you. But really, every match I have with him, I start by ducking, just in case.
Yeah.
And he either seems to start his match by throwing the skulls at you or just, like, kind of walking towards you, which in that case, I always just uppercut him. I'm like, what are you doing? And usually, he changes characters a few times in a match. So usually, like, I would say maybe 3 times, 4 times, depending on how long the round goes. He likes to turn into Goro a lot, but he also will turn into any other character. So when he does that, you just kind of follow that same idea you would for fighting those characters.
Yeah.
As a shapeshifter, it's kind of a cool thing, but at the same time, it's a limited basis of how many changes I don't know exactly how long he does, if it's like 10 seconds, something like that.
Yeah.
And then he changes back to his old dapper self.
Yeah, which is pretty easy if you dodge his fireball. But
Yeah.
I guess the next question is there any version that you know of where you can play as Goro or Shang Tsung in the first game?
Not that I know of. I don't think there's any codes, which is really interesting because later on, especially in 3, and I think going forward, there's usually things where you can play as boss characters. It was always fun in 3 because you could play as you could put the right code and you could play as Motaro or Shao Kahn. And they both had actual fatalities on top of everything else. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, when they beat you, you just kind of like, boop, you're done. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I thought I heard something like in the Game Boy version you could play as Goro, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading about, I was like, when I looked this up, but I'm not positive on that. So, but yeah, as far as Sega or Super Nintendo, you definitely can.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate, but
Right. So we went over the 9 regular characters in the game.
Yes.
And then there's also the hidden character.
Yes. Why don't you talk about the hidden character?
Yes.
Yep.
Reptile, which is funny because throughout the future games, and especially the second game, Reptile became a playable character and was one of my absolute favorite characters because again he's a ninja.
Yep.
And he combines Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
Yep.
And he sometimes will show up like in between rounds right before it starts, and he'll give you like a little clue.
Yes.
Because to fight him, you don't just fight him like normally. You have to actually fulfill certain circumstances. You have to fight at a certain stage. You have to make sure you don't use the block button. You have to make sure you don't take any damage and that you perform your fatality. It's actually, and even doing all that correctly, if the stage isn't like set up where you're not seeing like the proper thing in the background, you don't fight him. So it's a lot of things. So I can understand how people could play and never fight him. I had to look it up, and then even after that, it took a lot of attempts before I could finally get it to work.
Yeah. Yep.
But Reptile is very cool because he is, like I was saying, he's a mixture, an amalgam of Scorpion and Sub-Zero. And interestingly enough, Scorpion and Sub-Zero are yellow. I should say blue and yellow. And what happens when you combine blue and yellow? You get green.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So just a little side note here. Apparently you can unlock Goro in the Game Boy version, which is kind of hilarious because he's not in any other versions that you can play as. But I'm not sure exactly how you do it. But if you have the original Mortal Kombat for Game Boy, you can actually play as Goro. Wow. That's pretty cool.
That is, yeah.
But with Reptile again, one thing that makes Reptile tricky when you actually do fight him is that he seems like he's faster. He can hit a lot more. He hits really quickly, does a lot of damage. But one of the cool things about him, too, is that everything is kind of green. So just like his freeze is green, his like his spear, I believe, even has like kind of like a green like to the shaft of it, and he if you do your fatality on him, I was Scorpion when I faced him. His bones are actually green too after you do that, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah,
that they thought to that detail.
Yep.
So one of the things that is tricky is that to get him, you can follow the clues that he gives, but you have to be in the pit stage, which is the stage where you're up in this game, up on like that kind of stone bridge. It's like night out in the background. You can see like the moon.
This is the only stage too that has a stage fatality, right? Where you just do an uppercut and then you fall down. Yes,
which is cool too, because that's actually the area where you'll fight Reptile. If you do it, is where the body goes when you uppercut him, and they do like that pit fatality.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So you can't get hit. In that stage, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, especially
and you can't use the block button. Yeah, which again is insane. So that makes it tough, because you have to not only do that, but you have to get a double flawless. I think that as long as you get a double flawless, it doesn't matter if you go to all 3 rounds. Like, you can lose the second round, I think, as long as you still get double flawless. Which is strange, but it works. So you have to be on that stage. You have to be able to like see like these kind of like little flying objects that kind of come across the screen in the background too. So you could be in the pit stage, you could get your double flawless, not block, hit your fatality, and still not get it because that stuff's not in the background. Now, what's interesting about it too is that there's different like kind of silhouettes in the background. It doesn't matter which ones you see as long as you see them.
See something
like a flying cow, like witches,
Santa Claus, right?
Santa Claus. I think there's a UFO one. There might even be one that like of a flying nun. There's all this kinds of interesting stuff that is in the background. If you see that, then you know that you've got that stage of the requirement set.
Well, and the other thing is too, I think in the Super Nintendo version you get the Toasty.
Oh, you might.
I don't know if you get it. You don't get it in the Sega version because we just played it.
Right.
I have to go back in the Super Nintendo version, and that might have been an easier way to get him. I don't know. I can't say for sure.
I'm not sure.
But I know in the Sega version he's named Scorpion, which is weird.
Yeah.
They don't actually call him Reptile on top, which is strange.
That is really strange. Yeah.
But the Super Nintendo version, I believe they do call him Reptile. I believe.
I think so. And I think
Yep.
And I'm not sure, but it's so strange. One thing that's interesting and a little bit of random trivia too is that apparently you can use block only for Sonya, only because you have to use her fatality, and it'll still let you face Reptile. But if you use it for any other character, you can't. So when I did it, I had to literally just hit up button quickly in succession with Scorpion. And made me jump, but then when it came down and hit the ground, then I could do it on my opponent, and then I could face him. And it's really cool when you can actually fight him, but then the problem is he's really deadly.
Yes, he's very good.
It can be done really
but beatable. Very beatable. I mean, you just got to stick to regular moves.
Exactly. You just have to be smart and take it slow and not like get too like excited that you're fighting him. You have to just think smart.
Right.
He can beat you, but if you beat him, you get to do your fatality on him, which is nice.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you have Scorpion or Sonya, and you do that on there, where they turn him into like the bones, those bones are actually green.
That is cool. So he's definitely the toughest. He might be tougher than Goro, actually.
I would say so,
yeah.
And he became, kind of the set for having these ideas of these really tough to beat hidden characters. We ended up getting more of those in Mortal Kombat 2. Mm-hmm. You had Cybot, you had Chameleon, you had Smoke. I don't know if I'm missing any other ones.
Chameleon wasn't until later.
Chameleon was in the second one. She was the Katana and Melina character.
You mean Jade?
Did they have both in there?
I thought Chameleon didn't come in until Trilogy.
I feel like they had both, but maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe...
They definitely had Jade.
Yeah, I remember Jade. But she was, oh gosh.
Yeah.
We get there, but...
Yes.
I just wanted to go over the 7 different levels in this game.
Sure.
The courtyard, the palace gates, warrior shrine, the pit bottom, throne room, and Goro's lair. Goro's lair freaked me out as a kid with the eyes. I hated fighting there.
I hated
fighting there, but yeah. But...
yeah, some of those stages were rough.
They were just freaky. The Goro's Lair one was freaky because they had the eyes and you had the bones and the skeletons in the background, so that just always freaked me out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, a little freaky when you start looking at stuff.
It was. Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that was Mortal Kombat 1. It was a lot of fun. So
absolutely. Still highly recommended for people who want to know what the series will start like, and you can play a lot and really enjoy it and kind of go back to a simpler time.
Let's go through the scores. Let's start with replayability.
I think that, like in any fighting game, there is definitely some replayability. Mm-hmm. You can play through. You want to play through with different characters. It's a lot of fun. I would say that for replayability, for me, I would give it probably a C+.
Yeah.
Just because you can play through it, you can play with different characters. But even with that, there's not a ton of characters early on in this series. When you go to like Trilogy or down to like, Armageddon and other things, it's just huge rosters.
Yes.
So you kind of you'll get a little tired of it. If you have more, like other people to play with, that'll probably add it up a little bit. But I would say so there is some replayability, but it's not like huge. You're not like you're gonna play this and you might walk away from it and come back, maybe down the line again and play for a little while.
Yes.
But yeah. So that's my opinion on the matter.
Sure. I would say replayability, I'll give a 6. You can always turn up the difficulty, which is definitely hard on the hardest level for sure. But yeah, you can play as different characters. You can, do the fatalities, do the different moves, and play the different difficulties, and then you can put the codes in and do stuff with that. But that only is going to take you so far in Mortal Kombat 1. It's not a lot of different modes you can do, but still, I'm sure a lot of people still play this game on fighting tournaments. So it is. So I give it a 6 though.
Very good.
Graphics. What do you got for graphics?
Graphics, it's interesting because looking back on it, it definitely doesn't look. I mean, definitely you can tell that it's older. At the time, it was pretty state of the art, pretty breaking the mold. So I would give it probably a C+ on that as well. It doesn't really hold up to today's standards. But at the time, it was definitely revolutionary, and it's still kind of fun to look back and see like how things looked back then when they started to do like pre-rendered graphics or motion stuff like that. Showed kind of the sign of the times that was coming with a lot more of that kind of stuff being used in video games. So
another cool thing, Goro was actually made out of claymation, which
I know,
cool.
which is so
the
cool.
only character. But
yes,
I'm gonna go 7.5 because I'm gonna take a little bit how it was when it first came out, which would have probably been like a 9, but I'm gonna put a little modern touch. I'll say 7.5. Not the prettiest game, but there's a lot of cool looking levels. Characters are really cool, so I'll give it 7.5. I think the game definitely did improve the graphics later on. Sound.
Well, it's interesting because the Genesis version doesn't have quite as much like of actual like sound effects. Like you don't hear as much of the voices of characters as you do. Yeah,
you miss that Raiden and Liu Kang feel for sure.
You do get to hear scorpions get over here.
You do.
But because you don't hear the other sounds, it almost makes it seem strange that you hear that one still.
Yep.
Now on Super Nintendo, I think you do hear more.
You do. Yep.
So that's good. But yeah, I feel like that in the Sega Genesis version specifically, that it suffers a little bit from not having all the sound. So I'm going to have to give it probably a C in that regard. I think it's pretty even keeled that way. There's not a ton. Some like the Test Your Might stuff is fun when you hear that and things like that. So yeah, I think it's pretty average in regards to that. If you get a version where you can hear everything, it might put it up a little bit, but I'd say pretty much a C.
Yeah. I would go. Some of the music's pretty cool. Sound effects are cool. I'll base it off the Super Nintendo because that's more of the complete sound. Not as good as the arcade, but
sure.
I'll go 7.5 on it.
Okay.
Not the most dynamic soundtrack, but it definitely gets the job done for sure.
Sure. So, and as you go down in the series and here, get to like some of the later games, then even like 2 and 3, you get a lot more. And there's more of that satisfying feel when you hit an uppercut and you hear, like different things after different sounds. And absolutely.
Difficulty.
Difficulty is interesting. there's definitely some parts of it that can make it a little bit tricky. Those endurance matches
Yeah.
come to mind.
Yeah.
Specifically. In fact, that's a thing in the series. They keep around, and it's always kind of a tough thing.
And I know whatever difficulty you have it set at, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It'll just increase
Yeah.
over time. Like, yes, if you play it hard, it's going to be hard from the get-go. But
Right.
I feel like even if you're playing on very easy, it's still going to be more
Get to
challenging.
points where the
Yep.
computer is like, okay, we're not going to let you keep winning.
Yep. It's that arcade mentality.
It
Keep the
is.
quarters
Yeah, well,
coming.
exactly. It's got to eat up those quarters.
Yep.
So I feel like the game overall, I'm going to give the difficulty what do I want to give it? I'm going to give it a B minus. I
Okay.
feel like it's fair enough. Sometimes you'll feel like you get in a situation where, like, okay, the computer seems to know everything I'm trying to do before I do it, and that can get frustrating.
It'll block it no matter what. I feel like some matches you can't keep winning in a row. It's just
Right.
going to win no matter what. But
But I think that
Yeah.
in most cases it feels fair usually. And every
Yes.
once you get like a match like that, and that can be a little frustrating. But overall, I think that it's a game that's definitely beatable.
yes. Yes.
And you just have to keep at it.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat 1 for difficulty, I'm going to give it 8.5.
Okay.
Some parts do frustrate me, like the endurance matches can,
Yeah.
but Goro doesn't really ever frustrate me too much, either does Shang Tsung. So I'm going to give it 8.5, so I think the game, and we'll get into Mortal Kombat 2 eventually, but it's
Yeah.
a lot better than Mortal Kombat 2, where it's just ridiculously
Yeah.
hard.
Oh, sure.
Or at least
Even
for
like when
me.
you get into like 3 and Trilogy and Ultimate, like that game really gets to a point where it's like, oh, we're not going to let you keep winning those matches in a
Yeah,
row.
that game is hard, but I could still beat those ones. Whereas 2, and I can't wait to play 2 because
Yeah.
I want to see how we learn the
Yeah.
strategies. I'm excited to go into 2. But anyways,
Looking forward to playing as
I don't want to
Baraka,
foreshadow yet. But anyways, 8.5. So let's do overall.
Overall, I would say I'm going to give the game a... The thing is, it's such a fun game.
Yes.
But at the time, I don't think that it's necessarily like a super polished game.
Yeah.
And again, it's the time of it.
Yes.
So I'm going to give the game a C+.
Okay.
I find a lot of things really enjoyable about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those games that I can go in there and just have fun with, and I understand
Mm-hmm.
the limitations of things at the time, and I understand what it's going through. It's one I can plop in, have fun with, and then kind of walk away from. It's not one that I'm going to be like, okay, sitting here like strategizing about and everything and
Yeah.
thinking about much when I get away from it. But it's still a very fun game. So I would say a C+. I would say for its historical impact and what comes down the line from it, then I would give it a
yes.
higher rating.
Yes.
But just looking at it as a standalone game, I would say probably a C+. If I was looking for like the legacy of it, I'd probably put it up to like a B.
B. Yeah. No, I get that. I think the reason why I got this game was just to have it as part of a collection.
Sure.
It wasn't the best out of 2 or 3.
Right.
And it was just like I had to have it, and I got it like used for cheap. So
Sure.
that
And-
was nice.
And
Yeah.
and it allows you to appreciate what comes later on when you can understand the sequence of it too, and kind of where it came from and
Yeah.
what it's leading to.
Yeah. Overall, it got me into the fighting genre, so I'll never forget that
Yeah.
aspect of it. But it still was entertaining enough, but I also have to realize that it's not the best in the series.
Sure.
So, but it's nostalgia factor for me. I'm
That's important too.
gonna go 7.8.
Okay.
Because I don't want to go 7.5, but I don't want to go 8.0, so I'm going to go
gotcha.
7.8. So that's what my overall score is. Just iconic game, great game.
Absolutely. I think it's a game that everybody that's especially a fan of the fighting genre in general should pick up and
Yeah.
play, should give it a whirl just to
Yeah.
understand kind of the roots of things and where things came, because a lot of things were really inspired by Mortal Kombat and kind of a lot of the fighting genre war, so to speak, going
Yes.
on between them and Street Fighter and other ones that show up like Clay Fighter, Killer Instinct, Samurai
All that
Showdown.
stuff. Yeah.
So many
Oh
fun
yeah,
games.
Samurai Showdown was definitely influenced by Mortal Kombat with
Yeah.
the way they did blood and stuff.
Right.
So, yep.
So a lot of great games,
sure.
and really that genre really was really taking off around
Good
this
stuff.
time. I mean, you go to an arcade, and half the games would probably be shooters, and half the games would probably be fighting games.
Yes, yeah, those were the big ones back
Yeah.
then. Yeah, like the Area 51, but then you got the fighters and stuff,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
the NBA Jam and NFL Blitz and
Yeah.
those things. So, Yeah, Mortal Kombat. That was a lot of fun though, going back and revisiting that.
Absolutely.
So-
It makes me want to play more of the, like you said, 2, 3 trilogy. So many different games in the series that I'm excited to play now as well. So.
Yes. Awesome.
But yeah.
So kind of looking forward to what games we're going to be playing next. We decide that we're going to go to Mega Man 2.
Which, if you remember, loyal followers, that our first one we ever did was Mega Man 1.
Yes.
So Mega Man 2 is an exciting one. It's actually one of the first Mega Man game that I ever owned. Got it for my birthday when I was a wee one. And still one of my absolute favorites. So
I'm looking forward to go back to another Mega Man game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we were going to do Donkey Kong Country 3, which we will do after Mega Man 2, but
yes.
I think we had to put Mega Man 2 first.
Absolutely.
It's been waiting in the wings. So.
Absolute classic. So Dr. Wily, we're coming for you.
Yes. He comes back somehow. So.
That's right. He's a tricky one.
So yes, our next retro review crew, we will be playing Mega Man 2. And please hit this, if you like our content, hit the subscribe button.
Absolutely.
Resident Evil did not do so well, unfortunately. Hopefully, you guys, if you hear this one and you haven't listened to Resident Evil, go listen to that one. I'm surprised because survival horror, you'd think people would want to hear more about that, but that did not do as well as some of our past videos.
Yeah.
But,
so give it a shot if you guys haven't listened to it, and leave any comments below if you want us to. If there's any suggestions that you guys have for other games that you might like us to play going forward. Yes. We have quite the collection, and we're always looking to expand it. So
yes. So, all right. For that, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Mortal Kombat, and we'll see you next time with Mega Man 2.
Looking forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-byes.